The galaxy has exactly 3 unbreakable rules. 1. Never stare into the corona of a dying star. 2. Never attempt to negotiate with the hive mind of the Krell. And 3. Never, ever get between a Vykati apex predator and its prey. But what the wider galaxy didn't know, what a team of elite alien assassins was about to learn in blood, terror, and shattered armor, is that there's a secret 4th rule. A rule humanity brought with them to the stars. Never try to kill a human when their monster is watching. Before we dive into exactly how a supposedly weak human turned the galaxy's most lethal predator into a guard dog, hit that subscribe button right now. We post the best HFY stories in the sector, and you do not want to miss the bloodbath that's about to unfold. Subscribed? Let's get into it. To the Galactic Council, humans were a paradox. They were soft, they were fleshy. They possessed no natural armor, no venom glands, and no biological weapons. By all known evolutionary metrics, humanity should have been prey. Yet, humans had one terrifying evolutionary trait that defied all alien logic: the unstoppable psychological need to pack bond with absolutely anything. Ambassador Elias Vance was living proof of this insane human phenomenon. He had been stationed on the deep space diplomatic hub known as Aegis Prime. His mission was simple: broker a peace treaty between the Terran Federation and the reptilian Zoran Empire. But Elias wasn't alone in his quarters. Sleeping at the foot of his bed, curled into a ball of razor-sharp obsidian scales, was a Vykati cub. The Vykati were not pets. They were nightmares born in the deep darkness of a death world. Fully grown, they stood 9 feet tall, boasting 6 limbs, acidic saliva, and a sensory network that could detect a heartbeat through 3 feet of solid titanium. Even as a cub, the creature, which Elias had affectionately named Buster, was the size of a Terran wolf and weighed 200 pounds of dense, lethal muscle. The rest of the space station's inhabitants thought Elias was a dead man walking. They watched in absolute, paralyzed horror as this fragile, fleshy human hand fed chunks of synthetic meat to a creature that could snap his spine with a single twitch. They didn't understand the concept of a good boy. To the aliens, Elias was just keeping a loaded, highly unstable biological bomb in his living room. What they failed to realize was that humans don't just tame animals through dominance. They tame them through empathy. Elias had rescued the cub from a black market smuggling ring 3 months prior. He had spent weeks sleeping on the floor next to it, speaking in low, soothing tones, earning a trust that the alien universe believed was impossible for a predator to feel. Buster didn't see Elias as food. Buster saw Elias as his pack, his family, his alpha. And you do not touch a Vykati's alpha. As the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate the night cycle, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling vents in the corridor outside Elias's quarters. Then another, and another. 3 Zoran assassins. They were the absolute elite, equipped with light-bending stealth suits, molecular edge blades, and neural dampeners to silence their footsteps. The Zoran Empire had no intention of signing a peace treaty. They wanted war. And the easiest way to spark a war was to leave the Terran ambassador's severed head on a silver platter. The assassins bypassed the biometric locks on Elias's door with terrifying speed. It took them less than 4 seconds. They thought this was going to be a simple job. They thought they were hunting a soft, helpless ape who was fast asleep in his bed. They slipped into the pitch-black room, their thermal visors locking onto the heat signature of the human under the blankets. The lead assassin raised his molecular blade, ready to strike, but they had completely missed the second, smaller heat signature in the room. Because Vykati scales are completely cold-blooded, they don't register on thermal scans. They blend perfectly into the darkness. Right as the assassin stepped forward, a low, guttural vibration rattled the floorboards. It wasn't a growl. It was a mechanical grinding sound, like heavy steel being dragged across concrete. The assassin froze. From the absolute darkest corner of the room, 6 glowing bioluminescent blue eyes snapped open in the dark. And then the shadows began to rise. The silence in the room stretched until it felt like it was going to snap. In the galaxy's vast database of assassination tactics, the Zoran strike team was trained for every conceivable variable. They were prepared for automated defense turrets. They were prepared for laser grids. They were even prepared for Elias to have a concealed plasma weaver under his pillow. But there is no tactical manual in the universe that prepares you for waking up a Vykati. The lead assassin, a battle-scarred veteran named Vrax, tapped the side of his helmet, switching his visor from thermal imaging to ambient night vision. The lens whirred, adjusting to the darkness. What Vrax saw in that glowing green interface made his twin hearts completely stop. Standing between the assassins and the sleeping human was a wall of rippling, obsidian scales. Buster was no longer curled in a ball. The creature had risen to its full, terrifying height, all 6 limbs planted firmly on the steel floor, gripping the metal so tightly the deck plates were actually buckling under his claws. Vrax didn't even have time to issue a retreat order. He didn't have time to blink. Because a Vykati doesn't roar before it attacks. Roaring wastes energy. Roaring warns the prey. And to Buster, these highly trained, elite, technologically advanced assassins weren't a threat. They were just meat that had wandered into his alpha's den. With a sound like a coiled steel spring snapping, Buster cleared the 15 feet between the bed and the door in a single impossible bound. The sheer kinetic force of his launch cracked the floorboards. The assassin on the left didn't scream. He didn't have the lungs for it anymore. Buster collided with the armored alien, his massive jaws clamping down on the Zoran's reinforced combat helmet. The molecular-grade polyalloy was designed to withstand a direct hit from a sniper rifle. But Vykati's jaw pressure evolved to crack the hyperdense shells of magma crabs on a high-gravity death world. The helmet shattered like cheap glass. The first assassin was thrown across the room like a broken toy, slamming into the bulkhead with a sickening crunch. Instantly, the perfect silence of the assassination mission was shattered by the deafening sound of tearing metal and alien panic. Elias jolted awake. The human gasped, thrashing in the tangled bedsheets, disoriented by the sudden chaos. His eyes darted around the room, struggling to process the absolute nightmare unfolding in the dark. He saw the shimmering, light-bending camouflage of the 2 remaining assassins. He saw the molecular blades glowing with lethal energy. "Buster!" Elias yelled, his voice cracking with sheer human terror. That shout changed everything. In the minds of the 2 surviving Zorans, the equation was simple. The beast was wild. The beast was chaotic. If they made a loud enough noise or presented a bright enough threat, the animal would scatter, leaving the fragile human exposed. That is how biology works. Animals flee from fire and superior force. Vrax drew a heavy plasma pistol, a weapon strictly banned on the station, capable of melting a hole straight through a starship hull. He aimed it directly at Elias's chest, the weapon whining as it charged to maximum lethality. He pulled the trigger. A blinding orb of superheated plasma erupted from the barrel, illuminating the room in harsh, strobing white light. The shot was perfect. It was a guaranteed kill. But Buster didn't scatter. Buster didn't run. Instead, the alien universe witnessed the terrifying, illogical power of a human pack bond. Defying every instinct of self-preservation deeply ingrained in his predatory DNA, the Vykati cub threw his 200-pound body backward, deliberately intercepting the line of fire. The plasma bolt slammed into Buster's shoulder. The explosion rocked the room, filling the air with the smell of ozone and scorched scales. Buster hit the ground hard, sliding across the floor and crashing into Elias's bedside table. Vrax let out a guttural hiss of triumph. The beast was down. The human was next. But as Vrax raised his pistol to take the final shot at Elias, a wet, heavy rumbling echoed from the floor. Buster wasn't dead. The Vykati biology holds a dark, terrifying secret. When wounded, their nervous system doesn't register pain like normal creatures. It metabolizes the trauma, converting it into a potent, hyper-aggressive biostimulant. Slowly, the massive creature pushed himself up off the floor. The plasma burn on his shoulder was smoking, but the wound was already sealing itself with thick, coagulating acidic blood. Buster raised his head. His 6 bioluminescent blue eyes flickered. Then they shifted from a calm, oceanic blue to a violent, pulsing, radioactive crimson. He didn't just want to protect Elias anymore. He wanted to erase the things that had hurt him. And as Vrax frantically mashed the trigger of his overheated plasma pistol, he realized with absolute, freezing dread his weapon was jammed. In the infinite, terrifying expanse of the cosmos, there is no sound louder than the hollow click of a jammed weapon when an apex predator is staring you down. Vrax backed away, his clawed hands shaking. For a Zoran elite, fear was supposed to be a surgically removed emotion. They were bred for cold, calculated murder. But the creature slowly advancing toward him wasn't just an animal anymore. It was a force of nature. Buster's crimson eyes illuminated the destroyed bedroom in a hellish blood-red glow. The acidic blood dripping from his wounded shoulder hit the titanium floor, hissing and eating through the metal like wet paper. The second surviving assassin, a towering reptilian named Kale, made a fatal miscalculation. Thinking the beast was solely focused on Vrax, Kale deactivated his cloaking field and lunged from the shadows. He raised his molecular blade in a two-handed grip, aiming to sever Buster's spinal column in one clean strike. It was a perfect, textbook execution maneuver. Against any other species, it would have worked. But Vykati doesn't just see with its eyes. Its entire body is covered in microsensory pits that detect shifts in air pressure. Buster knew Kale was there before Kale even twitched. Without even turning his head, Buster's spiked, whip-like tail lashed out. It moved faster than the speed of sound. The sonic boom cracked the reinforced glass of the quarter's observation window. The tail slammed into Kale's chest plate with the force of a freight train. The assassin didn't just fall back. He was launched. Kale smashed into the steel ceiling, his armor crumbling like tin foil, before dropping to the floor in a lifeless, shattered heap. Now it was just Vrax. The lead assassin dropped his useless plasma pistol. His breathing was ragged. His biomonitors were screaming in his earpiece, warning him of a catastrophic spike in his own heart rate. This was a complete operational failure. The human was supposed to be dead in his sleep. Instead, Vrax was trapped in a locked room with a hyperlethal Deathworlder. But Vrax was still a Zoran elite, and Zorans never die without taking their target with them. He drew his backup weapon, a hypertoxin needle blade. A single scratch would deliver a neurotoxin so potent it could melt a human's nervous system in 3 seconds. He didn't look at the beast. He looked at Elias. Elias was backed against the wall, clutching his chest, his breathing heavy. To Vrax, the human still looked incredibly fragile. Soft, easy to break. If Vrax could just cross the room, he could complete the mission and die with honor. Vrax activated his gravity boots, preparing to launch himself directly at the terrified human. But then, something impossible happened, something that defied every piece of Zoran intelligence ever gathered on the Terran species. Elias stopped backing away. The human's terror, the wide eyes, the frantic breathing, the shaking hands suddenly vanished. It wasn't replaced by calm. It was replaced by something much, much worse. Adrenaline. The galaxy didn't fully understand human adrenaline. They didn't know about the ancient, primitive chemical cocktail that floods a human's brain when their pack is threatened. They didn't know that humans evolved as persistence hunters, designed to chase down prey until it simply collapsed from exhaustion. Elias didn't cower. He didn't beg for his life. Instead, the soft, fleshy human reached over to a heavy, solid steel, decorative lamp on his desk. He ripped the power cord straight out of the wall. He gripped the heavy metal base like a baseball bat, his knuckles turning white. "You shot my dog," Elias whispered. The tone of his voice sent a shockwave of ice-cold dread down Vrax's spine. It wasn't the voice of prey. It was the voice of a predator that had just been unleashed. Vrax hesitated, just for a microsecond. But in a room with a furious human and a berserker Vykati, a microsecond is a lifetime. Before Vrax could launch himself, Buster roared. It wasn't the mechanical grinding from before. It was a deafening, glass-shattering shriek that shook the very foundations of the space station. Buster lunged, pinning Vrax to the floor under 200 pounds of unrelenting muscle. Vrax screamed, thrusting the hypertoxin needle blade upward in a desperate blind arc. The blade found its mark. It sank deep into flesh. But as the blood pooled around Vrax's armored gauntlet, he realized with absolute horror it wasn't the Vykati's acidic blood. The blood was warm, and it was red. In the brutal mathematics of galactic combat, humans were considered an absolute zero. But the universe was about to learn that humans don't do math when they're angry. If your heart is pounding and you're loving this insane display of human loyalty, smash that subscribe button right now to join our pack. You do not want to miss this climax. Vrax stared at the crimson blood dripping onto his visor. His reptilian brain completely short-circuited. It made no sense. The human had thrown his own fragile, unarmored body over the apex predator. Elias had taken the hypertoxin needle blade directly into his own bicep. He had shielded the monster. In the wild, the weak sacrificed themselves for the strong, only under the influence of mind control parasites. But this was a conscious, deliberate act of defiance. The hypertoxin was now in Elias's bloodstream. According to Zoran imperial science, a human nervous system should dissolve into biological sludge in exactly 3 seconds. Vrax counted down. 1 second. The potent, bioluminescent green venom pulsed through the veins in Elias's arm. Vrax smiled beneath his cracked visor. The human was dead. The mission was a success. 2 seconds. Elias let out a sharp, ragged gasp. His grip on the heavy steel lamp tightened. Vrax waited for the inevitable collapse. He waited for the human's eyes to roll back, for the biological shutdown to take hold. 3 seconds. Nothing happened. Elias didn't melt. He didn't drop. Instead, he slowly looked down at the needle buried in his flesh. Then he looked at Vrax. "That stings," Elias whispered. What the Zoran Empire didn't know, what no one in the Galactic Council had bothered to study, was the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the human immune system. Humans evolved on a planet where half the flora and fauna naturally produce neurotoxins. Humans consume lethal poisons like caffeine, capsaicin, and ethanol for fun. To a Zoran, the hypertoxin was a death sentence. To a human flooded with a massive, primal dose of survival adrenaline, the alien neurotoxin acted like a highly concentrated shot of pure stimulant. It didn't shut Elias down. It supercharged him. With a horrifyingly calm motion, Elias reached down and grabbed Vrax's armored wrist. Vrax tried to pull away. He couldn't. The soft, fleshy human's grip felt like a hydraulic press. The alien assassin's reinforced bone structure began to creak under the sheer, hysterical strength of an enraged, chemically supercharged ape. "You came into my home," Elias growled, his voice dropping to a terrifying guttural pitch. "You tried to kill me." Elias leaned closer, his eyes burning with a primal fire that made the Zoran assassin want to recoil in terror. "But you hurt my dog." Elias twisted. A sickening snap echoed through the room. Vrax shrieked as his arm was broken in 3 places. The assassin released the hilt of the needle blade, thrashing wildly under Buster's crushing weight. Beneath Elias, Buster watched the entire exchange. The Vykati cub's highly evolved intellect was processing an impossible revelation. The alpha was bleeding. The alpha had taken a fatal strike to protect the pack. In Vykati culture, the alpha leads from the back, letting the weak die first. But this human had put himself between the blade and the beast. The pack bond didn't just strengthen. It mutated. Buster let out a low, vibrating purr that rattled the very air molecules in the room. He didn't look at Elias as a master anymore. He looked at him as an equal, as a brother in blood. With a vicious mechanical snarl, Buster clamped his massive jaws around Vrax's remaining good arm. He didn't bite down to kill. He bit down to hold the assassin perfectly still. Elias raised the heavy steel lamp base high above his head. His breathing was heavy, ragged, completely wild. He was no longer a diplomat. He was a Terran defending his den. "Please," Vrax begged, his voice synthesizer spitting out frantic, high-pitched static. "Mercy. Council law demands mercy. Elias's eyes were cold, dark, and utterly devoid of diplomatic grace. Council law doesn't apply in my bedroom, Elias said, but before Elias could bring the heavy steel crashing down, a blaring, red emergency light suddenly flooded the room from the corridor. The station's automated defense alarms began to scream. Warning! Hull breach detected. Sector 4. Warning! Heavy, mechanized footsteps thundered down the hallway. It wasn't just station security. It was a fully armed Zoran extraction squad. And they had heavy particle cannons. The heavy steel door to Elias's quarters hissed, glowing white-hot as a breaching charge was planted on the other side. They had exactly 5 seconds before the door blew wide open. 5 seconds. That was all the time they had before the polytitanium door was turned into molten slag. For seconds, the Zoran extraction squad on the other side was arming heavy particle cannons, weapons strictly designed to vaporize armored shuttlecraft. 3 seconds. If you want to see exactly how a human and his dog absolutely dismantle a heavy assault squad, hit that subscribe button right now. This is where the galaxy learns why you never, ever corner a Terran. Let's finish this. 2 seconds. 1. The door didn't just open. It detonated. A blinding shockwave of plasma and shattered metal ripped through the bedroom. 6 Zoran heavy shock troopers stepped through the smoking breach in perfect tactical formation. They had overlapping energy shields. They had their weapons spun up to maximum yield. They fully expected to step over the charred corpse of a human diplomat. They expected to retrieve their elite assassin and leave before the station security even blinked. But as the smoke began to clear, what they saw made their combat stims run ice cold. Vrax, the most feared assassin in the sector, was pinned to the floor, his armor crushed and his bones shattered. Standing over him wasn't a cowering, soft-fleshed diplomat. It was Elias. The human's eyes were completely dilated. His chest was heaving. He was gripping a massive steel lamp base in his bloody hands like a primitive club, and right beside him, standing shoulder to shoulder with the fleshy ape, was a fully enraged Vykati predator, its 6 eyes burning with radioactive crimson fury. The squad leader hesitated. It was a fatal mistake. Open fire, the leader finally roared, raising his particle cannon. But Elias was already moving. Human persistence. Hunting isn't just about endless endurance. It's about kinetic geometry. Elias hurled the solid steel lamp base like a prehistoric spear. It sailed through the smoke with terrifying velocity, smashing directly into the squad leader's chest plate. The kinetic impact shattered the alien's energy shield projector into a shower of blue sparks. That was the only opening Buster needed. The Vykati didn't leap. He vanished. Moving so fast the air cracked with a miniature sonic boom, Buster slammed into the squad's left flank. His 6 limbs turned into a blur of obsidian blades, acidic saliva, and sheer unstoppable violence. The hyperdense armor of the shock troopers peeled apart like wet paper under his claws. But the truly terrifying part wasn't the beast. It was the human. Elias didn't hang back. Supercharged by the massive dose of alien neurotoxin, completely ignoring the bleeding hole in his arm, he dove into the fray. He snatched a dropped molecular blade from the floor. He didn't know Zoran martial arts, but he knew human bar brawling. It was a horrifying symphony of violence, a flawless, unspoken dance of death between a Deathworld monster and a Deathworld ape. If a Zoran trooper aimed their heavy weapon at Elias, Buster's spiked tail would whip out, shattering their knees before they could pull the trigger. If a Zoran tried to flank the Vykati from behind, Elias was there, driving the stolen glowing blade straight through the weak points in their armor. They fought as one mind, one pack. It was over in exactly 45 seconds. 45 seconds for a supposedly fragile diplomat and his pet to reduce a Tier 1 heavy assault squad to groaning, broken heaps of scrap metal and shattered pride. The station's automated security forces finally stormed into the room, their weapons raised, but they froze, staring in absolute, paralyzed awe at the carnage. The smoke slowly cleared. Elias dropped the bloody molecular blade. The survival adrenaline was finally wearing off, replaced by the crushing weight of exhaustion and the burning sting of the neutralized toxin. He stumbled, his knees buckling, and fell heavily to the metal floor. Instantly, the terrifying, blood-soaked apex predator dropped its monstrous, aggressive posture. Buster trotted over, the violent crimson in his eyes fading back to a soft, gentle oceanic blue. He nudged Elias's injured shoulder with his massive, scaly snout, letting out a low, worried whine. Elias smiled, coughing as he reached up to pat the creature's heavily armored head. "I'm okay, buddy," Elias wheezed, scratching behind the Vykati sensory pits. "Good boy. You're a very good boy." 3 days later, the Zoran Empire signed the peace treaty unconditionally. They didn't sign it out of newfound diplomatic respect. They signed it out of sheer, unadulterated terror. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, officially classifying human pack bonding as a class 1 psychological anomaly. Because the galaxy finally understood the terrible truth. If a fragile, unarmored human could tame the darkest terror of the cosmos with nothing but empathy and a few scraps of meat, and if that same human would gladly endure lethal neurotoxins just to protect their new friend, then humanity wasn't just another species. They were the undisputed apex predators of the stars.